Join us.
Let's walk the talk.
This is 702.
We want to get into a conversation now about envoys. We've been speaking so much about a special envoy, of course, on the back of the news coming out yesterday from the Union buildings that President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed. It was on Monday, I think. Mcebisi Jonas as a special envoy to the U.S. His job, from my understanding, is to help mend ties. But what does it mean? There was a lot of confusion where some people think, does it mean that this is not the ambassador? Does he replace Ibrahim Rasool? Does he work alongside him? What does it mean? What are his responsibilities? Is he expected to move to the U.S.? So we're going to try and make sense of all of that. I'm joined now on the line by Professor David Monyae, Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg. Professor, good morning. Welcome to Radio 702.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. The term special envoy every now and again makes it into our lexicon, becomes part of a big narrative. We get a little bit confused, but I don't think we have a full understanding of what it means. So one of our listeners has asked for us to do a breakdown, really, of what it means. What is the role, actually, of a special envoy? If you can maybe help us understand the term in and of itself and what a special envoy's task is to do.
Special envoy, like ambassador, represent the country. They are more or less the same, but they differ slightly. Special envoy is appointed on an ad hoc, on a special task to handle a specific issue or few issues. In this case, to reset the U.S.-South Africa relation, to unblock, so to speak, whatever hurdles along the way, and speaking to particular stakeholders within the U.S. and allow conversation to continue and ease the relationship given the ongoing tension. However, an ambassador is different because ambassador will have accreditation, simply put, being accepted by the head of state, representing the head of state. And that's why an ambassador is called His Excellency. It's not the ambassador, it's the extension of the president, the credentials of the president in a foreign government, and governed by the Geneva Convention. While a special envoy as a ad hoc does not necessarily have to stay in the U.S., might have a special passport as an ambassador, but does not really have to have a special visa to work in that country and accept it and stay in an embassy, as well as deal with the more formal channels, with the protocols that involve an ambassador handling a whole list of issues under the sun. However, a special envoy will deal with specific issues in and out, and so that's the difference. But both represent the president.
What kind of situations call for the appointment of envoys, and how do you differentiate between the different kinds of envoys that are sent out, and where do they go? Do they all just do you get appointed as special envoy specifically to go deal with another country, another president specifically? I'm trying to figure out also what kind of situation, I think that's the heart of it, necessitates the appointment of a special envoy.
A special envoy, for instance, let's use the Great Lake region, Rwanda, Burundi, or DRC and the like. South Africa has had special envoys. At some point, it was Ambassador Welile Nhlapo, for instance. The special envoy will then deal with these multi-countries, you get into and try to have a sense of that region representing the president. There's also an element of a special personal relationship between a special envoy and the president, not necessarily getting bogged down into the bureaucracy of foreign affairs and the channels and protocols that I had mentioned. But yes, work closely with foreign affairs ministry, but at a very high level. And therefore, when a special envoy is received by a foreign government or president, in this instance, President Trump, doesn't have to go the formalities. And there's an understanding that he's speaking on behalf of the president. The ambassador does the same, but in a different way. And it takes a time to appoint, accept it, and work through those channels and embassies as we have in this country.
How are special envoys received generally? I mean, one of the big questions, again, I can only speak now of Mcebisi Johannes because it's a big talking point at the moment, is how he'll be received. What kind of reception awaits in the US? Is there formal reception, or does he quietly enter and go meet with the people that he wants to meet with, the different parties that he wants to engage with, to try help win South Africa some sort of favor? Or is there a formal reception that is expected, which is something what would expect if a minister's traveling or even an ambassador?
I think he'll be given, depending on the passport he uses. I mean, in this instance, I think he'll use a diplomatic passport, which means a special entry into a country. But I do not think he'll have, motorcade and the protocol of an ambassador. However, respected, representing a head of state, and normally is judged more on the president. He's bringing a message from a president, less so on him or her, and therefore, in the case of Mr. Jonas, I think it will be he'll be judged more in the fact that he's representing President Ramaphosa.
How effective are special envoys? I mean, his task is quite mammoth, but I also think about the South Sudan. If I'm correct, it is Deputy President Paul Mashatile who also plays that role. Perhaps let me take a step back, Professor. Sorry, let me take a step back. Even those who are serving as ministers from a president can represent envoys, correct?
Yeah, a special envoy could be someone from government structures, but most of the time is someone outside. And in this case, business person from the political party, a religious leader, or any other person, or a professor, any person of high standing in society can be the wishes of the president. But what the requirements, the ability of that person to have networks, understanding the workings of that particular country or region, and the ability to speak and fully convey, firstly, the message of the president, and also persuasive in a situation where there's tension, speaking to different constituencies in the U.S. in this instance, ability to sell South Africa and the president's message, opening up for negotiations and understanding clearly, for instance, South Africa and U.S., in what areas can South Africa compromise to unease the tension, in what areas South Africa won't compromise in terms of foreign policy principles. So those are kind of issues that he's expected to be playing in the U.S.
Even though I think an ambassador has, it sounds to me that there's more stringent measures or parameters to operate within. And even though you've said that the envoys, like the ambassador, are extensions in essence of the president, in terms of the will and the ability to make decisions, to be more independent and functioning, do they have that? Do they have more freedom to make decisions and to act? Or also, are they also held to strict regulations and expectations? Because at the heart of it, you do represent a president and a particular sovereign nation.
The envoy won't be restricted with certain protocols. For instance, not allowed to speak any place, communicating, a certain way of handling government-to-government relation. An envoy is much more free. Yes, will behave in a much more diplomatic way, but is much more free and represent more directly the president without necessarily going through your foreign affairs or the embassy, or making everything that the ambassador does. I mean, the embassy officials have to be there, protection, and then ensure that he's or have a lot of people in the room. So I think he will have indirect personal, and he can report directly to the president or a minister without necessarily going through this heavy bureaucratic paperwork that normally diplomats handle.
And how effective are envoys usually in helping to deal with sticking issues, in resolving conflicts and building diplomatic ties? How useful are they? How effective is that intervention?
Oh, they can be extremely useful. If, for instance, if there's a special envoy coming to South Africa, you'll expect that person to meet, for instance, the ANC, to meet the civil society, to understand issues, speaking to scholars, and speaking to a number of other people outside government, in government, and also to be able to speak directly, given channels directly to the president, given the fact that we'll have certain message from President Ramaphosa in his case. So it really depends, and therefore the person has to be, I think, be clear, articulate, and be able to understand those dynamics in any given situation.
If you are listening and you've got questions for Professor Manyae, please feel free to call in or to send a voice note. What do you understand? What are you curious about with the role of special envoys? The numbers 011-883-0702. You can send a voice note or a question to him on 072-702-1702. The South African example of envoys, which ones have we had that have been particularly successful, be it in dealing with issues on the continent or more broadly in the geopolitical space?
Yeah, since 1994, I think we've had a number of envoys sent to so many places. I've already mentioned former South African ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Welly Lenhlapo, Professor Tshidi Madia, for instance, into Great Lake region. And given the role that South Africa played in the Great Lake region, Burundi, dealing with the DRC crisis, and therefore I think these envoys were able to speak to different stakeholders to ensure that you maintain peace in the Great Lake region and represent the president in those instances. Both President Mbeki as well as President Zuma have had special envoys in so many places.
And then those that are here at the moment, are there any at the moment operating in South Africa trying to work on relations between us and other state players?
Offhand, I don't know of any, but there are a number of special envoys that come in and go. They don't necessarily have to stay in the country. I think the EU will deploy special envoys coming to discuss issues of climate change, for instance. We'll be hosting the G20, for instance. There'll be different special envoys from different countries, try to have a sense, also an input in and protecting the interests of their country and ensure that those issues are highlighted in the G20 summit. So it's an ongoing, United States still have, China also have special envoy on the Horn of Africa. So these special envoys do play a critical role to deal with conflict, to deal with a number of issues, particularly one issue or two or three, not the role of an ambassador that deals with all sorts of things. Your country's nationals in that country, climate change, dealing with trade, diplomacy, and all other stuff. Envoy is issue-based, task that has to be resolved urgently. There
are a couple of WhatsApps that have come in now, Professor. I'm just going to go through some of those for you. One says, will Mr. Jonas be accepted in the US even though he still holds his views about Trump? I mean, the political views of somebody sent as an envoy, do they matter where they're going? If in this case he says it's something that he said in the past, how important is it when you look at the character that you appoint as a special envoy, that they themselves are not people who cause controversy or have done something that might be deemed controversial where they're going, where you are assigning them?
It really depends with the environment. I think we are handling a very poisoned environment, the U.S. South Africa, that involves a number of issues that he might be able to navigate, but I think he's going to also to face a lot of problems, which has nothing to do with him as a person. The mere fact that if the United States, for instance, wants South Africa to drop the ICJ case, and I doubt very much if Pretoria will be able to drop that case, because that would be the end of its standing globally. It's a principal question, and or be forced to leave BRICS, for instance, or to abandon the entire agenda for the G20 summit. There are a number of issues that it will be really hard for South Africa to compromise on. But others, there are issues, the politics at the end of the day, it's all about food on the table. There are certain pragmatic moves that South Africa could compromise and allow the relationship to be on a good footing.
Another WhatsApp here. Hi, Tshidi. If these envoys need people who have strong connections with the host country, as Professor Monyae is saying, in this case of the USA, what on earth will Mcebisi Jonas offer to the Americans, because he's a conflicted individual, and the USA will definitely not entertain him? That is a sentiment that keeps coming up about what does he have to offer. Professor, there is also a voice note from Kingsley. I just want you to take a listen, please.
Dumela Tshidi and team, Kingsley from Germiston. My question regarding being a special envoy to a country, in particular Ntate Mcebisi Jonas, is to what extent does the personality of the individual and the official channels that he is able to engage with determine the effectiveness of his role, particularly when you're dealing with a United States president that appears to be quite petty, irrational, and has no issues with telling blatant lies.
All right, thank you. That's from Kingsley. That speaks to the tools that he needs to use, the access that he does require in order to be successful, doesn't it, Prof?
Oh, indeed. Also, he, beyond the tools and everything else, he also has to have a clear, thought-out mission in terms of the issues packaged in a way that we are willing to give in these areas. These are no-go areas. One is not sure what kind of a set of issues that he's going with. Is it to save AGOA? We know AGOA is dead in the water as it stands. To open a new trade agreement between South Africa and China and the US. Those are kind of things that one would expect him to open up the channels. His own issues and utterances, given the fact that he's playing an ad hoc role in and out, it really depends on President Trump and his team, whether they will accept him or not. They might not, given the fact of some of the utterances he has unfortunately made, and the position he's sits in MTN. MTN has issues in Iran. So
yes.
Some of the issues, if they really want to be petty, they might raise those issues, or just let him stay in Washington without giving him high-level access. It really depends. So the bigger question is that has the president opened up channels behind the scenes, back door channels, to allow him to be effective? If not, I do not see him succeeding.
And just very briefly, my last one really, in the current political climate, geopolitical climate, do you see more envoys being employed as a way to manage the many, many tensions that we're dealing with across the globe?
Yes. I think we are now getting in that era, a chaotic world order we're getting into, that at times will rely more on individuals and personalized nature of diplomacy than the formal that we are all used to. So we are already getting in that world order.
And holding them accountable if you've appointed people into special envoy, do you just revoke their right to be a special envoy, or other ways that are available to a president, a head of state, or even a host country that's dealing with a special envoy to hold them accountable for actions that have gone awry?
It depends. When he gets in the United States, I think it shouldn't take him a week or a month to know whether he's going to be successful or not. And it depends with him. He would tell the president that it's a mission impossible. It's a mission possible, given how he is welcomed. And if the president has the powers to say, come back, there's no need to continue with this. So it all depends with the president.
All right, so that sounds to me like it's going to be a very quick read of whether it's something that is successful or not successful in that regard. Thank you so much. We're speaking to Professor David Monyae, Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg.